What's up, guys? This is Nikki from the Bike Minded Podcast, and this episode is brought to you guys by the folks over at bicycle.com. They're the globe's largest marketplace for used bikes, where you can find over 20,000. You can search from over 20,000, you guys, used and refurbished road, mountain, gravel, you name it, bikes. You can search their marketplace for whatever brand you're looking for. They even deliver a box to your door so that they take all that work out of it for you. So feel free to check out their website. That's BUYCYCLE and use our code BikeMinded to receive 0% seller fees when you sell your bike on their marketplace online. Get your used bike sold so you can get a brand new one. Check it out, guys. Bicycle.com and use the promo code BikeMinded. Now let's get into this episode. Woo! All right. Can everybody hear themselves in there?
Yes.
Checking. Checking.
Dude, I'm very impressed with this audio setup, man.
Thank you, man.
Yeah.
Thank you. I've been trying to...
He's been tweaking it.
I've been trying to tweak and get the video and everything else involved. It's a lot, but I'm kind of a geek for some of it. So
Nice.
We know you're a geek.
and visibly we can tell. Oh man. Well, hey, we got Derek in the studio today. You get the horns today.
Love that.
Big time.
Yeah.
Been a while, dude, since we had you. Quite some time.
Yeah.
But,
I remember our last conversation
yeah.
because I think I was hinting at the Everest Rome ride. And even when I was talking to you, I didn't want to do it. And then as it came closer, it felt like I had to do it. And I'm so happy that I did. It was one of the coolest experiences ever. But it was probably just over a year ago.
Yeah. And that's probably like, I don't know, maybe that's part of what this show is. It's like... Let's get yourself in front of some more people so that you're like committing. And it's like, now I've gone through all these rings of commitment. It's like, I can't back out of it now.
It's true. The accountability from putting something on the calendar like that and telling people I'm doing this on this day is almost unmatched, because you could tell even close friends or close family, but they'll also be there to support you if you're like, hey, this is really stressing me out. I can't do this. And maybe you'll have that one person that tells you to step it up. But when you just throw it out there to that many people, you have to follow through, or you just start to lose trust.
Yeah, that's half of the things I say on this podcast. It's like, I won't even believe I'm going to do them. But if I'm saying all this stuff, then you start getting comments or people calling you out randomly. And they're like, oh, you're going to do that? And you're like, I guess I said so. Yeah. So, yeah.
But it's certainly like, obviously, with everything that you've been through, we were talking about this a little bit before you got here. You know, life before an injury and life after an injury, you can make these big promises, but at a certain point too, you are really kind of a slave to your body. You have to listen to your body. Mm-hmm. Like, everything's changed with your body from here on out. So you don't really want to like write that check with your mouth that your butt can't cash, you know, to say the very least. But it's like, it changes everything. So we definitely want to check in with you, like where you're at.
I just learned that the hard way.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny because I had this injury at the start of the year, and there's been this whole side of me that doesn't want to change the things that I loved about myself before this, because I was happy with who I was, but also I go through this traumatic experience and I want to come out better. So I'm latching on to the way I operated in a certain sense, and part of that is throwing out these crazy ideas for rides. And for me, it was like, okay, I'm coming back and I'm going to do this the Everest Rome Fondo in Switzerland, because it got put on my radar with all their Everest rides the last few years, and it's, you know, 7 months out from the injury, that surely that's going to be plenty of time. You know, I've done harder rides than this.
How early did you commit to that? Sorry if I'm interrupting you there, but like how far out from... We've talked about this before. I did a big video that we put on our social and everything, just catching everybody up. Derek was obviously involved in a pretty severe car accident, almost took him out completely. Super scary incident. But how far away from that actual incident did you commit to this? Was it like right as you started? Like, where did that take place?
Honestly, I realized looking back how much of a psycho I was even putting these plans together, because 6 weeks after I got hit by the car, I had a really bad infection in my hip, and it was an infection from the surgery. I had an open pelvis fracture, and it was very messy, and so it got infected. It was pretty high chance that it would, and that whole story is disgusting, really traumatic, almost as bad as the injury itself, actually, just the way it exploded and the way what I woke up to.
Yeah.
But I was in the ER, the ER, emergency room, and I was waiting to get it was like a IV bag of antibiotics, and I signed up for the race then.
And I was good at time
He was
as any.
septic. You were septic.
I was okay, literally, and yeah, my white blood cell count was pretty
Like
high.
you got to put your phone down. Like I gotta finish registering.
I was just sitting there for 3 hours with a bunch of people in the ER, and it's like I was just trying to distract myself or something. And I was like, man, I'm going to sign up for this race right now. And I did. And then it wasn't like signing up for the race was like, okay, now I have to do it. But it more became this carrot to almost push myself a little bit. But what's weird through this process that I've realized is that I really don't need any external factor to push myself, because I have built such big lifestyle habits around training and riding and just health in general. You know, it's my business, and I've developed this since I became a trainer at 21, which was 12 years ago. And so it's like, I don't know. I don't need something like that to push me, because my default button, even when I'm just kind of going through the motions, is to take care of myself. Mm-hmm. And if anything, I need to reel it back in, and I need to almost put more limits and boundaries on it, because, 5 months after I went and did a 100-mile gravel race, and it went really well, and I'm grateful for that. But what I started realizing was, even building up bigger rides, it's not that I can't go do it, but I still have a lot of healing to do. Mm-hmm. And it's like, it's wearing me down in a different type of way. Mm-hmm. And what I've noticed is that if I ride too much right now, it's like my body just doesn't really want it. It's like, I don't know if it's because I've been so uncomfortable for 6 months, and the last thing I want is more discomfort. Because I think there's a part of me in the past that had to seek discomfort just as like validation for myself. I had a lot to prove to myself, I feel like, in the last few years. And so now it's the opposite. And it took a lot for me to basically come out and say, hey, I'm actually not ready for this ride. Mm-hmm. And it's because of the things I said before. It's like, I want to set this goal, and this is how I operate, and I want to push myself, and I believe I can do it. And those things are all true, but it's the reality of training for something, stressing about it, seeing it take away from your work and your business production, your family. I'm like thinking about this ride instead of being present with my kids. And that's when you realize you're like, I am way too consumed by this thing. And it's actually not a positive thing in my life.
Yeah, you got to look at the net, right? Like, what's the full outcome of this? And I think some of us don't closely evaluate that stuff enough, like all of the mental bandwidth, the time, the focus, the constant times you're just like calculating things, and then at the end of the day you're like, even as close as you are to it, at the end of the day none of us are paid by big bike brands to do this stuff. So it's like, especially being in your situation, you're like, it's remarkable how far and I have to applaud you. Like, it's really remarkable to see how far you've come from that. Like,
thanks.
The amount, and this was something I put on my notes, but the amount that your accident, especially people that are close to you in like a closer sense. I know, at least like myself, Chaz, like there's a bunch of these guys we like completely pulled back from riding on the road for such a
lots of people did,
long time. And I know a lot of people did, because you influence a lot of people, whether it's like just your business or just personally, like in the local bike scene. It just really shook a lot of people. And I know that myself, I see you and I are very different guys, but like we are in a sense very similar, dads of a few kids, like younger dads, and just to think about that all being taken away, it just like really shook a lot of people. It's just like, holy crap, like this could happen to any of us.
It still shakes me.
Yeah. And I don't think
It's-
it'll ever go away. And I think that's good to a certain extent. Like I can't empathize with that like mental trauma that I'm sure is going to be something you'll deal with for a really long time. But I can definitely say that there was quite a few people, and I've taken quite a few additional measures as I go out on the road now. You know, I have the radar in the back. I'm riding at very specific times. I don't ride out on major roads, like basically any times except for Sunday mornings, like when everybody's at church and the number, like statistically, like I think it's just less likely, but yeah, there's no perfect way to do it. But yeah, it's just a sheer like miracle that you're this far, period. So I just wanted to give you the props on that. I mean, it surprises me, but also doesn't surprise me because I know who you are.
Yeah. And I heard a lot of that from friends and people online, just about riding a little bit differently, maybe taking some time off the road bike. But to be honest, like I don't want anybody to take time off the road bike.
Yeah.
I love riding road, and it's just a really incredible sport. And as someone who's come from just mountain biking and the gravity side of cycling, pretty much as far away from road cycling as you could and still be on a bike, I've just grown to love this sport more and more and more. And I think what's strange about how I got hit is that it was on a quiet country road with not a lot of people around. And so it hasn't really changed my fear level when I'm riding around busy traffic.
Yeah.
But I'm still scared, honestly, right now to go out to some of these quiet country roads.
Yeah.
And that's almost the ironic part of it. And so I only bring that up because I don't think those external factors matter as much as just how aware you are on the bike. And my real motto right now when I go out and ride is just to ride patiently.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest thing, because having a radar is like a non-negotiable, I think, once you really start to use it.
For sure.
And
Yeah.
especially on those quiet roads. But, you know, making sure that you have light, making sure that you're just not rushing through intersections. You know, I would never tell cyclists that you have to go stop at every stop sign or every potential yield point or anything like that. I don't think that's realistic. And there's even some laws in some states like Colorado where you can legally roll stop signs and everything.
Yeah.
And when I got hit, I rolled the stop. I checked up and I wasn't going very fast. I was making a left turn on a tight country corner, but it was a 4-way stop and this dude blew it at 60 miles an hour. So before I even entered the intersection, really, I was already getting hit. And so if I would have not assumed the car was going to do what it should have done, I probably would have saved myself from it. And I don't blame myself at all, but I just think that assuming a car is going to do what they should do is kind of the wrong approach. And you have to do that within reason. But a lot of it, too, comes down with being patient. Like, even when I ride a bike trail now, I just slow down for people. And actually, I'm really stoked on the new Garmin 1050 head unit. Shout out to them. They have this bell that it works really well that I've been
Does
using.
it?
Yes.
I was wondering if I was going to
People
upgrade to
love
that
the bell,
one.
man.
The bell is
that
pretty
new Garmin
sick.
has gotten the bell has gotten a lot of and the like
The tap
pay thing.
The tap pay is cool. I mean, someone was like, "Oh, you just do that with your phone," and I was like, "Oh yeah, I forgot about that."
No, but that's the thing,
But
right?
there's it's like this.
It worked, right? People are
Yeah. No, the bell is sick. You just tap your screen, tap the bell, tap the screen, and people can hear it from far away. But I used to be watching my average speed on a bike trail, and there'd be people walking dogs, and I'm just bunny hopping these dogs instead of slowing down.
Yeah.
You know, or just weaving between people. And even now
Sure.
with my interactions with cars on the road, like I still have occasional people who just want to be mad at anything, but it's been so much better because I'm stopping more and I'm not rushing through an intersection or doing anything that could make a car feel uncomfortable, I think within reason. And it really has improved all the interactions. And I'm not going to say I'm totally protected now from it, but it has definitely made a difference.
And there's like some moments too. Like I was just thinking about this the other day. There's a difference between when you're riding alone. Here's like a major takeaway from me because I'm the same way. I like going fast on a road bike. I like that's the thrill, right? As the excitement. We come from dirt back. Like we want to do the stuff where you're pushing the limit, but you have to decide when that's the right moment. Beyond just the normal interactions with close traffic or whatever. Like here's a prime example. I do like a weekend ride up to Poor Choice a lot of the time, little like 40-mile from my house, door to door. And usually when I'm on my way back and I go down Auburn Folsom, if I'm with like a group of other buddies, like I'm mocking that, trying to go as fast as I can. That's like a thrill. But then I was riding back the other day and I'm like solo, and I'm not with my other buddies who, if something really goes awry, I don't know what's going to happen. And so like, even though this is more on the extreme end, I was like, I'm just going to coast down. Like I'm not doing something that's way beyond something I should do unless like I have people there to support, like, you know, thinking those extra steps ahead whenever you're going to do something that's, you know, whether it's normal interaction with like when you're weaving through traffic or the extreme end of like smashing down a hill. Like if you're with your buddies, that's one thing. If something really bad happens, they can vouch for you. They can get a hold of your wife. They can get a hold of like EMT, whatever. But yeah, if I were to just like go down that smashing 50 something miles an hour, knock myself out, nobody's there to, you know what I mean?
Yeah. But it's this crazy balance because sometimes when you're too cautious, you make unnecessary mistakes. And I think coming from a dirt background, you know that a lot.
Especially on the dirt.
On the dirt, yeah.
If you freeze up or if you're,
if you hesitate. And so there's a point where you have to just go enjoy your ride. And I think it's more about trying to build the habits of riding patiently, because you could still ride fast and ride patient. Totally. And maybe some routes aren't as fun because you're not going to blow through all these intersections you used to. I've noticed there are some roads I ride. I was like, wow, there's more stop signs than I realized on this road since I'm more aware of it. And maybe that part's not as fun, but it's just developing those habits so then you can still go out and enjoy your ride. Because I have definitely gone out since my injury, and you would think that I'd be on cloud 9 because I'm out riding and I haven't been able to in a long time, but I'm thinking about so many things and I'm stressed about this and I'm overthinking this that I come back from my ride. I'm like, that wasn't even that fun. Yeah. Because my mind wasn't there.
It's funny. I was going to ask you about that because I think for me, the biggest part of my injuries, I still struggle with my knee. I was at my orthopedic surgeon's office last week and I'm like, it's 2 years this month and I feel disabled. And I just want to wrap my mind around it. Is this just what life is? Is there any chances of it getting better? But the mental aspects of it hit me so much harder than I anticipated. I'm not typically a depressed person, but it was like it was this thing, cycling, this thing that I found that I loved more than anything almost. I found so much healing in it. And then post-injury, it turned into this thing that every time I climbed onto my bike, I wasn't joyful anymore. I was stressed and sad and reminded that I can no longer do this thing anymore. And I'm still working through it. Like my knee-jerk reaction to someone's offer, my knee-jerk reaction to getting invited to Italy was no, because I was afraid I couldn't do it, or I was afraid that I was going to be in so much pain, or I was going to hold back the group. And then I'm pushing through those situations, you know, each time I say yes to something that's intimidating, but it's a really long process to heal your mind and to get through that. Like, how has that been for you? I guess we could go into like, where is your body at now? And like, how has that presented itself for you throughout your injury? Like,
I totally resonate with what you're saying. And I would say it would be difficult to be 2 years down the line and still have those thoughts, but I think that is the reality. And so, yeah, I'm sure that is challenging. And I'm sure I'll be there in 2 years or in a year and a half at some level. You know, one thing that's been really tripping me out is that my scar from one of my surgeries hasn't healed all the way yet. And I've had bandages on my hip for like almost 7 months. Awesome. And it's this thing where you're like, yeah, is this what life looks like now? But I'm just so great. First, I'm just so grateful for healing. I mean, the fact that our bodies can heal and they're so intelligent beyond our understanding that they can fix themselves is amazing. And then you bring in surgical intervention and all these tools and medical devices and it is incredible. I'm so grateful for that. But there is a lot of these ways of thinking where you're like, okay, yeah, the first thought when I get invited to Italy is no. Because I've almost thought that same thing too when I get an exciting opportunity or I'm trying to make plans. I think the weirdest thing is making plans And in the back of your head being like, I don't even know if I can really do this because something might come up. And then you go down this laundry list of just fear, essentially, is what it is. And so I've had a lot of help with it. I've done multiple rounds of EMDR trauma therapy, which has been huge and has uncovered a lot. And I'm just trying to catch myself with those fearful thoughts, and especially getting fixated on something. You know, my wife Lish pointed out like a week ago, and this was one of the best things. It was one of the best things I've heard. I feel like God was speaking through her to me. Perfect timing, simple words. And she just said, she's like, I can tell that you are obsessing over this wound, and that its progress or lack of progress is determining how you feel that day. You're consumed by it. Like there's this thing going on that, and actually the big picture is very minor, especially with all that I've been through, and it's clouding everything else that's going on in your life. That's actually really awesome. Like I have some really awesome things happening right now, and I have not really taken them in. And it wasn't until she said that where I was like, wow, you are right. And also, she said that I need to start living like I'm already healed. And that was really powerful, because when you think that way, you almost go back to yourself before any of those fearful thoughts are in, where you almost feel like there's no limits in a sense. And of course there are limits within logical like reality of stuff that you can or cannot do based on a lot of factors. But instead of your body being held back by an injury, it's more so like, oh, I need to gain the fitness here and I need to work at this and whatever. So going back to that mindset, it brought this energy back to me. And it wasn't until I started really catching myself being like, okay, no fearful thoughts. I'm going to live like I'm already healed, that I realized how much of a funk I've actually been in. And because even though a lot of people have said like, oh, it's insane that you're already training and already doing all this stuff, I think what I've realized is that it is my default, like I said earlier, and I've been kind of just going through the motions, and I'm really starting to come out of the fog now to where I'm like, oh, I can do this for work. I can do this for the family. And I'm not just obsessing and ultimately having a lot of selfish thoughts about myself and just thinking about myself and just me. So
Isn't it wild how
it's been hard to get over that, and it's kind of went off topic of your
No, you
there.
didn't.
Thank
You
yeah.
didn't at all.
It's wild how
all
the women
really-
in our lives, like my wife does the same thing. She'll observe that thing in me, and it's just like clears this whole fog above your head where you're just, and a lot of time it is that over obsessive of just like your own story. It's like, get out of your own head. There's all this life happening around you. Like, let's focus on the good, or like where you could be, rather than feeding all your energy into this, relatively, as far as your whole life goes, negative thing. I mean, of course, you're going to take out of it a lot of great things and learn and readapt, but like you're giving it too much energy. And it sounds like she just like shook you out of that. Like, hey, let's be here. Let's move on from this and not feed it anymore.
Yeah,
So
one of my favorite sayings is, where your focus goes, your energy flows. And
That is a good one.
that is just the realest thing.
so
I'm
real.
gonna get it tattooed on my face. I'm just kidding.
Do it.
That's our next
Do
guest,
it.
is a
Do
tattoo
it.
artist on the forehead. We've got some tattoo artists. We can make it happen.
I wouldn't expect anything less from this
Oh,
podcast.
yeah.
So tell us about. So you had this plan. You're gonna do this Everest. Tell us about Switzerland and how your plans have changed.
Okay,
and what's
so-
happening? I'm so excited for you.
Thank you. I'm excited too. So I'm really proud of this trip already. It hasn't happened yet, but I'm proud of it because a few months back I was thinking, it was the first time I thought, okay, I need to call this thing off because this is too much. I'm realizing where I'm at now, how close this thing's coming up. I'm like, okay, I'm starting to freak out a little bit. And I was at a family barbecue and talking to my father-in-law. And he was asking about the trip, and I was like, yeah, I just don't know if we're going to follow through with it, yada, yada, and explained to him why. And then he looks at me, he's like, and actually to set this up a little bit more, the plan has been to bring my wife, Lish. We both of us have never been to Europe. In fact, we have 3 kids under 5, 3-year-old twins, a 5-year-old. And since they were born, we pretty much looked at each other. We're like,
You've been locked down. Yeah.
I'm not saying we can't go travel. Like we've done some trips, but like, 2 nights, weekend thing, weekend in Scottsdale kind of thing. And but we just said, don't like put pressure on ourselves to travel. Like we really want to travel, but like, let's raise the kids up. We're not going to dump, infant twins and a 2-year-old at our in-laws. Like that's just, and so anyways, we have not been to Europe. We're at a point now where we could get our kids set up with our in-laws and we could go to Europe. And so we had made these plans together, and the videographer I've been working with, Zach Youngberg, shout out to him. He's filmed the last few Everest docs. He's been filming with me since February for this documentary on the whole comeback, which is called ICU to Everest. And he's caught some incredible moments. I mean,
he does amazing stuff.
Oh.
I mean, everything he's done for you is just it's just high caliber for sure.
Thank you. I've been really lucky to have him, and he's gotten clips of me with my physical therapist early on. And when I put the 135 mil cranks on my mountain bike to start pedaling and trying to pick up a 20-pound kettlebell and I can't, I'm crying. It's just like crazy. So
I cried when I watched, it was a video early on when you were sitting on your bike. You had posted about it, and I remember sitting on my bike and not able to do a pedal rotation. I remember just sitting there sobbing and having and I had my mom there because I completely shut Remy out. It was a weird division because he was able to still ride, and like I couldn't be happy for him. That was a whole other thing. But like watching your story from afar reminded me so much of my own, and your injury was so much worse than mine. But there was so many aspects where I felt for you big time.
Yeah. And that trainer bike, I was watching all the classics earlier this year. I just sit on that thing for like an hour and a half and just stretch my knee.
Yeah.
Anyways, so setting the stage for you guys, we'd never really traveled as a couple. And my videographer is coming to document the trip. And the original plan is to go there in Everest. And he's going to bring his wife Dom, and my wife Lish get along really well, so they can have fun while we're doing our riding stuff. And then the second half of the trip, Lish and I go to Lake Como in Italy and just chill out. So this is the plan, but I'm at the point where I'm just going to call it off because I'm stressed out. I don't feel like I can do it. And in my head, my way of thinking up to that point has been like, well, if I can't justify the ROI on this trip for business, it's not worth the money.
Yeah.
And honestly, that's how I'm thinking, and that's kind of how I've always been, or at least for the last 4 or 5 years. And my father-in-law looks at me, and I'm telling him I might call it off. He's like, I bet Lish would really appreciate if you just took her anyways.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, she probably would. I never thought about that. And it's really sad to admit, but that's the truth. I hadn't really considered that I could just go on a vacation with my wife, and after all that we've been through, the beginning of the year, that'd be just an amazing
because the injury happens to your partner too.
Oh yeah.
It happens to everybody.
Well, and it's hard to get yourself out of that mindset, right? Like as much as we're talking about it being just you, it's like I suffer from that same thing when I'm thinking about like my business, because it does all come back to me. So you tend to focus on just, I need all this stuff to be perfect but then you are your actual business, and so it's even more concentrated. So it's really hard to get yourself out of that groove that you've worn, and you're like, yep, okay, so if I do a trip, it has to do this, it has to meet these expectations, and then you're not that same person that like when you met your wife and it's just like, oh, let's go do this thing for fun, or but it's hard to get out of that mindset. So I sympathize with that.
Okay, so father-in-law says, just take Lish.
Yeah, and I was like, wow, I really had never thought about that. And then I committed to that, and over the next couple of months, we're planning the trip, we're booking it, and I get remotivated to do the Everest. And I hadn't officially called it off at this point. And actually, the time it was almost 2 months ago, we went and did this gravel race, and it's 100 miles. I was like, okay, this is a good test to see if my body can just handle some stress. And it went really well. It was like a little over 5 hours, 100 miles on the gravel bike. I maybe stopped for 90 seconds in total. Rode with a great group. It was really, really fun, but it was almost this false sense of motivation because I finished the ride. I recovered from it pretty dang well, even with this crazy long car drive. I mean, driving home from Colorado and just listening to kids' movies the whole time is different than listening to the Bike Minded podcast the whole time.
There we go.
Oh, God, that would be torture in itself.
That's how you definitely lose your mind.
No, we did this trip and it went well. And literally I came back from it. I was like, okay, I'm like, let's go, let's do this. And start working with Coach Nate Dunn from Data Driven Athlete. Coaches a lot of our riding buddies, and just wrote a book. And I'm like, all right, I'm gonna commit to, I'm gonna do everything I can. I still don't know if I can do this ride, but I'm gonna just prep for it in the best way I can and just see what happens. And ultimately, what happened after like the first week of training, I was like, I am consumed by this, and it's doing all those things I mentioned earlier. This feels like too much. And what's actually crazy is that we had this really weird sickness come through our house that shut me down for close to a week, and it made a couple other things backtrack. And I was like, oh, like there's just no way that doing this is a good idea. And this was the hardest thing, was because I think I could go out and probably do it if I had to.
Yeah.
Really had to. But I actually think at this point it would do a little bit more harm than good. Because I know what it feels like to go and do a ride that's way above your pay grade. You know, even when I did the double Everest ride, I was averaging like 9 hours a week on the bike. And then I went out and did like a 27-hour ride on a average 11% grade hill. It was just, it shouldn't have happened. And so the repercussions of that, though, was I was destroyed for like a month.
Wow.
And even the Everest Rum ride I didn't have that much riding volume. It was 326 miles. It was like, you know, way beyond what I should be able to do based off the training. And there's a lot of reasons I think that was possible. Dialed health being one of them, but
Absolutely.
strength training. But anyways, I know the wear and tear and the toll that it actually does take on your body. You know, you can get through it. And I came out injury free, but like my nervous system was destroyed. Like I couldn't even sleep after it because I was like so tweaked out and fatigued. And so then I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, do I want to go on this quote unquote dream vacation and do that to myself? And then also, what if I actually do hurt myself now with this, you know, body that has a lot more hardware in it than it did previously? And I have way tighter muscles, and I have stuff that's still not operating. Like even my cycling
And a
dynamics.
wound that's healing.
Yeah, exactly. I have skin that still needs to get together.
Yeah.
And even my cycling dynamics, I'm doing significantly more work on my right leg still than my left leg on my ride. And I can tell with dual-sided power pedals. So I'm at like 58% right leg, like 42% left leg, which is a lot better because when I started, it was like 20 and 80.
Sure.
And so I start actually thinking, I'm not just like trying to talk myself out of it. I'm almost just bringing myself back to reality. And I was like, I need to call this thing off. But we're going, right? And so what then do I do? And so I looked at the event and I'm like, well, there's a lot of different options for the routes. I can do a shorter route, still go do a European Grand Fondo on beautiful Swiss roads. We're still going to film it. I'm going to go ride these epic mountain passes that are right by where we're staying. And that's going to be the first half of the trip. And the second half is going to be pure vacay with the wifey. And so now it's almost turned into this dream trip without the stress. And I'm just so excited for that. And it's funny because it's a way, it all happened because my father-in-law was like, you should go. And it made me realize my way of thinking needed to change about the whole thing. And
so wonderful.
So yeah, it's I think it's going to be pretty perfect.
That's amazing. That's got to be so difficult to get to that point, but also once you make that decision, right? I could imagine this just like shoulders just like ease up a little bit. And
well, it probably would have been easier if I didn't say it to hundreds of thousands of people online. See, that's the thing we talked about earlier, the accountability, and I've always lived up to it in regards to these rides, and that's something I'm really proud of. And one thing I preach too is this. It's very common in like the self-development space, which is you build self-confidence by following through on the promises you make yourself. So like that's how you develop confidence. Like if you say you're going to do something, even if it's very, very minor, you do it and then you trust yourself more. It's easy to blow off little things that no one else sees, but then you stop trusting that you'll actually get something done when you tell just yourself you're going to do it.
Yeah.
Right. So I had all these conflictions with it, but I ultimately had to just come out and say, like, I am just like not ready for this thing, and kind of explain what I told you guys. And it's just, it is just a different way of thinking. But I think ultimately I'm in a position now where I've been through so much discomfort involuntarily that the last thing my body and my brain needs right now is to voluntarily go and seek major discomfort.
Well, and here's to say, if
that's
you
the
were to
change.
push yourself, like you've talked about, you've gotten yourself into these deep holes, like pre-injury, right? And I've experienced this too, where you push yourself way beyond what you should. And I think a lot of cyclists have done that. And it does change the way your brain thinks about riding for a little while, right? But your brain is already dealing with like maybe like so many other things about your body that if you pushed yourself that hard, like there's a possibility you don't come back from that ever being as stoked about cycling, because it's like you've now stacked on these two very traumatic things, and now they're like maybe hand in hand, and it's like this is a result of bikes, you know. And now all of a sudden your brain thinks like bikes are bad, like just period, you know. And maybe that would happen, maybe it wouldn't, but like you do have to think about these things. Like, do you want to enjoy this thing you've been so passionate about most of your life? And I think everybody, honestly, the big takeaway whenever I saw that, it's like Derek is human. Like we all want to see you, of course, push the limits, because that's so awesome to see. But it's also really cool to see people be human. Just watch that Simone Biles doc, and like watching her just like go through that grueling thing of just like
And walk away
showing
from the
up to the Olympics
Olympics.
and just like,
It was amazing.
how many people just tore to shreds after that. But she was just like strong enough to be like, no, this is like, things aren't okay. I'm going to potentially actually like kill myself doing this. And, you know, for the sake of continuing to do this, like I'm going to walk away from this. And that had to be so hard. And it's like kind of a similar thing. I think most people, what they take away when they see that social post or you talking about it, or when you go and do this thing, it's like, he still went and did it. He didn't miss, as you say, like, you know what I mean?
It does complicate it. Like having, let's say you went through this injury without having a massive Instagram following. Like it does change things when you have an audience, right? It did, at least for me. Like Simone Biles talked about it too. It's like you have all of these people that have expectations and you want to deliver and you want to make people proud. But I think at some point you have to come back to, does the opinions of all of these other people, does that outweigh, like, say, what I think of myself or my partner thinks of me or my kids think of me? And like, I just think you have to kind of weigh that risk. I think it's great that you're making the right decision for you and for your family and your
Thanks.
partner. And it doesn't say anything.
Yeah. And everybody
Other than, like-
has plenty of examples of you overcoming
Yeah.
just massive things. So this is one of those where it's like, yeah, you just were almost killed in January. It's like to think that end of August when this is going on, that you're going to try to like, and that's so, of course it's amazing that you were still going to shoot for that mentally. I think you could do it mentally, like completely. And even physically, I think you could get there, but yeah, is it, you know, got to factor in all those things. And it's an important thing to just know when to say no. And you're still going to have this. I mean, man, you haven't gone to Europe yet. Oh,
Yeah, that's
dude, I mean, that's going to
man.
be the biggest payoff of all time. Like the ride will be amazing, I'm sure. But yeah, just to like sit there and like experience Europe with your wife.
So what is the new route?
So the new route, it's the Grand Fondo. It's like the Marmate. I don't know how to even pronounce it, but it's still under the Tour de Stations event, and it's still pretty big. I mean,
that's the other
it's like-
thing. It's like
So many people are going to listen. They're like, I still couldn't do it.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
Like you've already set the bar so high for yourself that it just like sucks. But it's like it's already probably still really, really hard.
Yeah, I think it's 133 kilometers. So I want to say that's around like 75 miles or something. But it's like 4,100 meters of climbing, which is probably 13K or something.
Yeah.
So it's still a legit ride.
Oh, yeah.
But it's not something that stresses me out. And to be honest, I think if you put me out there without an event, I'd probably go do something pretty similar anyways.
Yeah.
And even with the event, you know, I don't if I don't feel good, if something's off, like I can stop. Like it is all good.
Yeah.
And you know, it's funny. I'll get back into what you said real quick about the like expectations of the rides and whatnot. But with the event, I want to do it, even the shorter distance, because dude, events are really fun. And the energy that you get from them and being around like-minded people, experiencing it with people, even if you don't know them, it's just really fun to go out and be a part of an event. And that is kind of a bucket list for me, is to do a European Grand Fondo. In fact, I was supposed to go to Strade Bianche and do the Grand Fondo the day before that race in March. And that was going to be a very epic trip, and it got canceled because of this. And since then, in my head, I'm like, the only thing I want to do is go to Europe and do a Fondo for some reason. And so, yeah, that's going to be really, really exciting, and that's why I want to continue to do like an event while I'm out there. But I was going to go back to what you said about the expectations of people, and more so proving that I can push myself or whatever. I think there's something to be said about people going through something like this gracefully versus like trying to hang on to something that's not really there. You know, you almost see it with like actors or like the A-list celebrities from it's weird because I feel like there's almost not A-list celebrities anymore. It's like YouTubers and stuff. But you know, when you see like a artist for music, and then down the road they're just not really like they could have just gone off gracefully into the mist.
Yes.
But and then you think of like the Beckhams, and then you're like, wow, that is about as graceful as it gets.
Yeah.
And like the evolution of all of it. Well, I think if I was going to force myself to do something like that, it just I think there would have been a point where even if I would have done that event, I think it would have just felt forced at some point, because it really would have been. And I think it would have shown in some ways. And so that's one thing, like moving forward, I want to be able to do is just be like, okay, this thing happened. I want to come out of it like wiser than I was before. I want to grow from it. I'm a dad of 3 kids. I run a business. I want to do this gracefully. I don't want to try and force something that's just not there, and just be okay with that. And to be honest, that's the reason I got into road bikes anyways. There was a point where I didn't see myself going any further with mountain bikes, and I had a lot of closure with it, and it was okay for me to feel like I could kind of just move on, you know, and still really enjoy the sport for what it is and be a fan. And I still mountain bike. I just ride an XC bike instead of a big gravity bike, but there's a lot of pressure to not do that. And so that's kind of, I think, moving forward, what I want to do with this injury. Like my dad had told me, and this was the thing I actually wanted to say, which was, he just looked at me at one point. It was right after the Everstrom. He just was like, dude, you don't have to do something like this ever again. Like he was with me when I was hallucinating on the side of the road.
Sure.
At, 1 a.m.
Yeah, and the video, right? Like the video is gorgeous and it does all this stuff, and you do see some like gritty stuff. But there is like when the cameras are away and that you strip everything, and it's just like that is just a raw moment. And for a dad to see that is probably just like, geez, dude, like, I don't know. Like I'm here for him, but like it's probably hard to watch. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And looking back at some of the stuff, he's been with me for all these things, even the mountain bike Everest I did a few years ago, and just riding into the night, and I put him under so much stress.
Sure.
But he literally just was like, dude, he's like, you don't have anything to prove. I just want you to know that. And when I told him that I wasn't going to do this Everest ride, to hear his relief made me feel like I was doing the right thing.
That's
because
so wonderful.
I didn't realize how much it was stressing out my family. Because I